Morning, good afternoon, good evening, Y Whales. Again, wherever in the world you are today, Web3 connects really every single person around the planet instantaneously, except for these time zone things that we constantly struggle with. So, wherever you are and however you're watching, we really appreciate your time. Today's a super cool, kind of big project. And when I say big, there's a lot of times that people come on the show or that we see other podcasts of, and they've got an idea, and sometimes those ideas can be really cool, and they can be world and life changing. And this is one of the ones I'm not going to preface which way it is one way or the other, but I can quite simply say that the size and scope of which these two entrepreneurs look at things is really intriguing for me as a venture capitalist as well as an entrepreneur of myself. Let's go ahead and give some intros. So real quick, I'll start with you, Lauren. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got here today.
Sure, yeah. So my background started in the Media Operations Center at NBC Universal, and then I transitioned over into the film industry because film has always been my passion. And I ran the publicity and promotions for Universal Pictures. While I was there, I was on a lot of, production sets. I would do press junkets, red carpet premieres, and I just saw this massive disconnect of trying to find talent and how the filmmaking industry wasn't streamlined or efficient, really, in how it operated. So that led me to actually create and launch my own company, which I launched at South by Southwest called Cinematter, and that was to help streamline hiring production crew. While I was there, I went and still executive produced. I executive produced films for Elijah Wood's production company, Company X Spectre Vision, because all while building this, I also want to be boots on the ground, because I think that's so important when you're building something, to be boots on the ground in the industry of the problem that you're trying to fix. So through that, I started hearing about the blockchain technology and blockchain starting to transform how the film industry would start to operate. And I started researching companies that were on the cutting edge of that. And I came across Filmio because they were one of the leaders in the space. And that's when I transitioned. I'm the one that actually reached out to them and was really impressed and interested in their overall vision to reinvent Hollywood using the blockchain. And then I just joined them about a year ago, and the vision of the company and the product roadmap is very exciting and game changing for the industry.
I love that. And experience in any industry, is critical. And I always believe that anyone can break into, any industry they want and take the time. But there's something to be said about that 10,000 hours. There's something to be said about the successes and failures that come along the way and the nuances of you can reinvent the wheel, but if you don't know how the previous one was built, it's really hard to be, a disruptive to an industry that people don't understand. So I love kind of the background there, as well as the integration of some new thoughts with the old. Bryan?
Yeah, Lauren is amazing. She has that rounded set of experiences, not only as an entrepreneur, but again in the film industry, and has just incredible connections. Everybody loves her, which is rare in the film industry too. Like, you get different personalities, but just brings so much to the table. So we've been very lucky to have her for the last year or so.
Love it. Fabulous.
Thanks, Bryan.
So Bryan, you have a storied background as well. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm really a serial tech entrepreneur at heart, just a big propeller head, have a background in computer science, and started very early on, working for my dad. He's a brilliant computer scientist. We automated most of the broker-dealer and banking industry back in the 80s. In the 90s, I graduated with a computer science degree, and basically started right away, built an internet service provider, one of the first in the country in San Diego, and walked door to door with little zipper pouches, giving people floppy disks and trying to get them off of America Online. And merged that into a bigger venture, which became an e-commerce venture. We did a lot of web hosting. One of the things that we did as a team was create some technology in the very early days that allowed you to put more than one website on a server, because it was tied to an IP address. And we basically worked with Sun Computing, of all companies to
Oh, wow.
basically build a big monolithic web hosting infrastructure. And got very heavily into e-commerce. So e-commerce was really where things went sort of hyperbolic for us. Worked with IBM, rolling out their e-business division, traveled all over the world, built a couple of internet shopping malls, and then sold that to a company called Venda, which was acquired by NetSuite, which was part of Oracle. And so the e-commerce infrastructure that is currently Oracle's was something that I created. Um, so that was all fun and good and burned me out as an early entrepreneur, and decided to travel the world for a couple years and couldn't get rid of the entrepreneurial bug, and got busy when I arrived back a couple years later in the US. And the rest is really kind of how Filmio came to be. So I don't want to jump too far ahead if we aren't ready for that yet, but that was a lot of my entrepreneurial background.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit, because I again, this is the first time I've interacted with the two of you guys together, and right off the bat, it really is a really interesting partnership, because film is a very, like, this is the way things are done. We've seen
Mhm.
Netflix and some of the new streaming services pop up and kind of reinvigorate the workflows, being able to push out some content in some different ways. But in the same sense, they haven't really innovated much since, basically what Apple TV and others, when they said, hey, here's streaming, here's Netflix, and the rest are just now, kind of, let's just say, call it Netflix clones. But now all of a sudden you have somebody that really understands Web 1. And I will always refer to Web 3 as being closer to Web 1 than Web 3 being an evolution of Web 2, because we're essentially re-architecting the entire global infrastructure, not just on data, but also financial and identity as well. So, Bryan, when you're talking about the problems you had to solve, these were problems that people didn't even realize existed. like
Very true.
of course you need one server per website. Why? It's just, that's what a website costs. Who would ever have more than that? Because there's only, not everyone's going to have a website. And we're starting to see that break down now in Web 3, and understanding that there is need for evolution, multiple chains. There's, chain of chains, and level ones, level twos, level zeros, all these other things. So as I said, Bryan, one of the biggest things I see is that Web 3 and Web 1 are relatively closely related, much more than Web 2. When you kind of are comparing the differences between, blockchain technology and kind of where Web 3 is going today to your previous experiences in Web 1, what are some of the biggest, takeaways that you have, or kind of thoughts on that symbioticness?
Yeah, it's actually a really good parallel, because back in the Web 1 days, we were, for example, trying to create an e-commerce website using GIF images that were not transparent. So you had things like, corners on something that needed to have rounded corners on it. You had all kinds of things. It just was very rudimentary. And this was kind of like back even before Netscape days, and then Netscape came in and things started to get more usable. I think we're at about the Netscape days right now in Web3 is kind of how I look at it. The usability issues are massive. We've got things like MetaMask right now, doing things to allow you to instantly swap from within your wallet. That makes it easier, but the jargon is still here, right? There are things that normal people don't understand. And until that stuff is fixed, we're going to be kind of stuck, I think, in those early Web 1 days. Um, Mass adoption, in order to hit mass adoption, we really need, more tools, we need more automation, we need better user experience. And so I'm really happy to actually see in Web3 that there is a concentration now on this thing called UX, right? Which
Mm.
was not something it wasn't even a term back then. And the fact that that's there, I think, will give us a shorter path to mass adoption capability, but I don't think we're really there yet. We're getting closer.
I love that. Love that. So now that we've got the background, let's really hear about Film.io. I mean, it's very lofty goals, and take it away, whoever wants to give the elevator pitch.
I can take the first stab at it, and Lauren, feel free to jump in anytime.
Sure.
But this was really, I'll give you a little bit of the backstory just so you kind of understand where this came from. I know a lot of creators, and Lauren obviously does too, but, um, you know, I started having this repetitive conversation over beers with these creator friends of mine who, came out of Hollywood and, made movies and understood, that industry much better than I did at the time. And the challenge really was creators, even if you're well known, it's a really long road to try to get a movie produced, right? You
Oh
basically
yeah.
go through this process of trying to get connections, trying to get appointments. A lot of times, if you're an unknown creator, you don't have credibility, you don't have any street cred or clout, and it becomes nearly impossible. And the industry has been controlled for the last 100 years by a handful of big, powerful studios and a handful of big, powerful, individuals who basically are biased, and they don't always make decisions based on the kinds of standards that I think have become more normal in this universe today. Um, Basically, there's been a huge, huge problem. And so this was when I started thinking about this, and the conversation happened so many times. My mind couldn't get off of this problem, and so I contacted the smartest people I know in both the tech space and the filmmaking space, and started just brainstorming over scotch. And we came up with some ideas, and that was sort of the genesis of we need to do something to help fix this industry. And really what the solution is, to put it at a very high level, is we found the problem, the boogeyman in the industry was centralized power, right? And how do you solve a problem that exists because of so much centralized power is really through decentralization. And we actually thought of this before we even really applied blockchain to the solution. But the ultimate idea has been to remove the power from the few and the centralized construct of Hollywood, and through a token and through a DAO to hand that power to the creators and fans of the world. In essence, the citizens of the world, because everyone's basically a fan. And the story goes on from there, but that's the basic concept of what we're doing, is just democratizing this whole industry and rebuilding it from the ground up. Every component that you need to make a movie is part of Filmio, and we have built that on the blockchain and have tokenized it for the world.
So Lauren, before you start, and I'm going to say this, I have heard a similar pitch 7-8 times before. We're gonna do this. We're all these lofty goals. Lauren,
Right.
why will you guys succeed where everyone else is not?
I think we'll succeed because, and we have, a comp matrix of any type of competition that is out there, even if they're slightly similar to us. And
Yep.
what we've been seeing, and I think the biggest difference is that when we were approaching this idea and coming up with a way to go to market and a way to actually get people interested, where I think other competition lacks, as we break our audiences down very specifically. So we have 3 very different audiences: the crypto blockchain thought leaders and enthusiasts, with our token models, and being the filmmaking industry's first DAO, and then we have film fans and we have creators. And so figuring out how to not only reach these 3 different audiences, but bring value to them is really difficult. And we've come up with some really exciting marketing campaigns. And every time we go into an ideation session to brainstorm, how we're going to bring value to these different audiences, we keep all of their needs in mind. And I honestly think that's where the competition lacks, in their approach of just trying to market this big picture idea and not break it down and segment it into the actual audiences that it's going to bring value to.
I love it. Bryan, what's the, there's a lot of unique distribution models that exist today. How well integrated to what exists today can Filmio, are you guys planning to be?
Very. I mean, that's really for the first couple of years. We've been building this for a few years. It was pretty tough to explain this to studios and, really well-known people in the industry, because there was a perception that in the disruptiveness that this is bringing to the table, that it would disintermediate parties from the space, that, studios, for example, would be threatened. But that's actually not the case. This is really kind of an innovator's dilemma, sort of an issue for them. There's a big change happening. We're, leaning into fan involvement, and that's really the big difference in what we're doing. So what we do is we basically take the order of things, and we start with the fans. Creators post a project as a DAO proposal. They might not even know it's a DAO proposal, because some creators don't even know what a DAO is, right? We've simplified this user experience. They submit a project, and the first thing we do is invite them to invite their fans, and we invite our fans to come in and stake their tokens. We have a governance token called a fan token. Once that process starts, you're in the middle of building validation and building an audience through an algorithmic scoring system that we call the Go score. And the higher that score is, the higher the Filmio platform and the intelligence behind it, based on-chain and off-chain data, the higher the quality of your project the platform believes it is. That is a beautiful thing, not just for the creator, because the creator has never had credentials, really, unless they're well known. They've never had the ability to take a project that might be their passion project into a studio and get greenlit, get funding for it, get distribution. So for the creator, it's a beautiful thing to go into that, again, traditional market and go and get some traction. But for the studios, think about Netflix that spent $16 billion last year acquiring and developing content, of which a very small percentage anybody really cares about on the platform. They're dying for a solution that gives them the ability to vet these projects. And what better than a project that comes through the door with 500,000 fans attached to it, with a 4.8 star rating and a 98 Go score. I mean, you've got everything you need for a successful project to take place right there.
I love that thesis across the board, because you're actually asking people, what do you want? And while, there's directors and everyone else is going to have their own interpretation and to produce this content, at least making sure that this is something that people are interested in before you go ahead and spend the time, energy, and money to shoot it, is a massive win for any studio or someone that experiences this. Lauren, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no problem. No, just to piggyback off what Bryan was saying, especially having been on the publicity side at a major studio, when I was working for Universal Pictures, it was one of my first jobs, so I wasn't an executive or anything like that. But so I would also help run screenings and stuff like that to get audience feedback. But that process was done so much later, after the film already had the financing put behind it and it was already produced. No matter what the feedback was at that point, the film could still flop, right? So they could spend $100 million with A-list celebrities, and everybody's kind of like, how did this flop? And it was because that system is broken, and that's what we're trying to kind of shake up, and have the actual people that are going to pay to be, or streaming these projects and these films and these TV shows. They're the ones that should be having the say of what they want to see. We see a major film flop, and then we see Sharknado 25 do really well, and studios are kind of confused about that. It's because that's what the fans want to see, and that's the content that we need to be creating.
That's very cool. So what level, and the great part is about, the DAO technology, and while it's still young and it's evolving, the idea is that you can have, instead of shareholders that have nothing more than a monetary, attachment to this film, have your most rabid fans, helping to drive where this goes. Is the voting just for should the film be made or not, or does it actually drive a little bit into the actual production and distribution of the films?
Well, it's an interesting question that also ties into the last question, because traditionally, if somebody did a pitch to a studio, they would have one shot, and then they're either, thumbs up, thumbs down, they get greenlit or not. In this case, it's an ongoing process, right? That Go score, kind of to your question, is something that is largely driven by fans, DAO members, staking their fan tokens to a project. And as long as they're garnering support from the fans, they're able to grow that score. And if it starts really low, it might be because, they had poor ideas in terms of who should be cast in the movie, or the script just wasn't right, or, a variety of different things. It might even be as simple as their assets that they have for their film just aren't really very good at communicating the excitement of of the story. They don't have a good lookbook. So in this way, they can reach to the audience for not only feedback, but there's also a maker community. And we actually just had our first lookbook created by someone in the audience recently for a project. It was our first revenue event. We didn't plan to have any revenue yet, but it just sort of happened. And the audience can get very much involved in this process, and in that way, they can. It's more of a continuum than a one a flash in the pan kind of an event.
And I think that's a really big differentiator that I want to point out is you're not referring to what films would traditionally have, which is an audience. You're referring to now as films now have a community around them. And that's exactly a very big differentiator, because an audience is someone you speak to. A community is someone that you work with. So what you're saying here is that if I raise enough awareness, we can reshoot Game of Thrones season 8. Is that what I'm hearing?
Season finale.
We can do it, or we can get ready for 9. Yeah, right. Totally. I think it's a good question. Actually, it's this is a place for all films. Like, it doesn't have to be a fledgling project by an unknown creator or a new one. We have some amazing, very well-known celebrities that are having trouble in the traditional world raising money for their films, for example, that are, onboarding things within Filmio. But this is a place where an established brand could come to curate and build and further develop a relationship with their audience that would tell them whether another season is even desired, or maybe a change in cast or, storyline, whatever. So this is, they can launch NFT projects. There are so many things you can do, but we feel like this is the central hub for all, entertainment projects to live and evolve their brands in so many different ways with the fans this time, because in the old world, the fans only got involved when it was time to collect money from them to watch the movie. So this has really changed the order in which things happen. And if you think about, here's one of the things that we really looked at to see what's the potential market size for this thing, the kind of adoption that we can get, because maybe, fans don't really care that much about content in this way. But if you look at IMDb, or you look at something like Fandom, right? Two sites that I've, loved for so long. Fandom has 300 million monthly active users who come in just to consume content about the films that they love. They don't have tokens. They don't get to say what gets made. They don't get to interact with the stars, or the cast. They're basically, it's a one-way communication. But, think about the application of having an audience of that size or greater, because this is global, within a fully interactive community where you can do all the things that now fans can do because they have a voice and they have a role in this environment.
There's so much here. And I think that's one of the biggest things is you guys are approaching this. And I think, Bryan, this is a little bit of your background, is more of an operating system and a little less as making films. Right. It sounds like whether it's a film, or almost anything else, these same techniques can be applied to a number of kind of creative asset classes that are really looking for that same ability to have, what's the user feedback? Because right now it's a very static and boring thing. They shoot the film, they bring in a couple dozen people, they say, what do you think of it? They ask some questions, they look at cameras of where people are looking on screen, and then they go ahead and roll with it. And that's how you almost end up with Sonic with teeth versus Sonic without teeth, is without that user feedback, the really mainstream, kind of crowds yelling at them, they would make some terrible things. So this could actually be a big problem solver. Lauren, how have executives from your old world reacted to this?
Yeah, so I think the major thing that we've been having discussions about is what Bryan had mentioned earlier, is being a tool, not a compete to the old system, but being a tool to enhance the old system. And so the major conversations are even with streamers that we've had, is that this is now a major community for them to not only scout market validated projects, but also raise more money and get financing for projects that already have backing, and they can say, hey, there's going to be a better ROI on this because this is already validated by the audiences. So it's really exciting because it's again, you could think of it as being a competition in how things are done, but it really is an ally, and it's a tool and a resource to make not only the projects more successful, but the investors or the financiers behind them more successful. And I mean, that's huge with executives. So we're really excited about being able to bring that to them.
There's something I'll share with you that I won't go into too much detail, but just as a little bit of kind of evidence of this happening. And this is all pretty recent, right? Because something has shifted really with the world's understanding of blockchain. And I think it might have been NFTs that really helped kind of bring it into the limelight and really show creators that there's something really here for them. But we just got an executive from Amazon Studios on board the company. And, they've been trying to solve the problem of fan feedback on films for a long time, a couple iterations that they've tried to roll things out, and other studios. And so this is, it's gaining adoption, right? It's less of a fear at this point. It still is. And we still have to be very intentional in how we describe this, but Lauren said it really well. I mean, we're an ally. We're not a threat. We're just here to bring some efficiencies and some level of equality, and kind of remove some of the bias and things that the world already knows that these are issues, right? Like, look at the last 3, 4, 5 years of events and things that have happened with big celebrities or what have you. I mean, there's never been a better time in the world to try to solve these problems. So it's really being welcomed as people start to understand it more.
Right.
Well,
And just
this is business 101. This is mitigating risk. This is,
totally.
and even a 5% decrease in risk is on a $1 billion film is a huge amount of money to take it off there. Lauren, I'm really good at cutting you off. Keep going.
No problem. And just to expand on that a little more, we've all seen the issues with diversity inclusion in film and television, and we've all seen streamers and studios, create these diversity inclusion teams and try to reach, or programs that are trying to get more diverse creators behind the camera, in front of the camera, as production crew. And, this will be a massive solution for that specifically as well, because we're allowing anybody from anywhere to have a voice and create a project. And so this just opens up a whole new pool of diverse talent for these studios and streamers as well.
I love that you brought that into the conversation here, because from a perspective, I think it's great, that anyone in the world has the same opportunity to pitch a film idea or to be involved in a variety of places, or to have their voice heard. And unfortunately, sometimes I feel, and I can only say feel, is that it's implemented incorrectly, or it's forced into places that it doesn't fit.
Exactly.
And when something doesn't fit, especially in an artistic format, it really throws a lot of things off. Not saying that these things are right or wrong at any point, but there's a lot of other ways that if you let the talent speak for themselves through what they're good at, what they do, I will say that suddenly it's like there is no color, there is no religion, there is no race, there is no boundaries. Anywhere in the world, someone can be interacting with this and saying, this is how I feel towards a film, and how I want to help my interpretation go for it. I mean, clearly you could go full, I'm sure with your guys' platform, they could do, the casting could be done by governance voting, and all the way down to what equipment is being used to shoot and edit the film. But clearly you want to leave that to directors, and also give them
that feedback. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But even being able to have it is something that they don't have today.
Right. Totally. And yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of the other things that is really kind of unique, I think, about the DAO and this model. We're not charging people to, get in the DAO. They don't have to buy tokens to become part of the DAO for a couple of reasons, right? One of them is that a DAO raising capital to then deploy for a project is a very limited amount of liquidity. This ecosystem and this industry needs way more liquidity than that. So that's a kind of self-limiting thing. And we have a solution to that with another token that we call the film token. So the first one, the governance token, is the fan token. The film token is the financial power, and the fan token is the governance power.
Hmm.
But the way that the fan token and the DAO construct is really set up, and the reason it's set up not to charge people to get in initially, is because we get asked the question all the time, don't you want really film experts, to be the ones that are judging this stuff? And our answer is not really, because they're not the end user. They're not the consumer. We want the broadest cross section from across the world, right, to get involved and give us their opinion. So, there are airdrops when people sign up, they complete actions. There are lots of ways for them to get these tokens. We want everyone to be involved in this DAO. And that side of it, when you're voting on a project, it's kind of more of a soft DAO, right? Because you're not governing, the corporate entity, so to speak. You're not getting involved in those hard decisions. But that's the first stage of the DAO. And then, not to get too deeply into the DAO because it starts to get, a little complicated, but there are tiers, and people who are able to show their level of interest, participation, and qualification are able to get involved in governing things beyond their opinion about which projects, should move through the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it's really meant for broad, consumption and distribution.
Bryan, I love the way you're talking about this, and the way you guys are really approaching it, again, from a kind of, it's a soft to firm touch, but it's not like, hey, that's, if they vote on this and it's somebody got a hold of the governance tokens and they want to remake some horrible film in a horrible way with a horrible director, and the funding isn't there, then there's some safeguards to prevent that from happening.
Right.
But I when you're talking about the ratings and everything else, like Rotten Tomatoes, I still think they were one of the very first Web 1 companies that existed, to kind of just do ratings. And when I go on there to look at the film, the first thing I do is just ignore any of the critics. I don't care one bit what a professional has to say.
Same.
And there's a lot of times the films that I absolutely love and I think are fabulous have an amazing watcher score or kind of a user score, and the critics are like 10% or worse. And I think that really showcases that the industry is shifting to this. I say constantly that Web3 is designed for Gen Z. And I really think that, this level of input, this level of kind of ownership and identity is really only capable using Web3 technologies.
Yeah.
Lauren,
agree.
Lauren, how hard is it to explain, the blockchain integration that you've done today to these executives?
Yeah, so that goes back to the breakdown of those audiences. It has been a very interesting and a really fun creative journey to ideate how to not only reach but educate the film industry about what a DAO is, about blockchain terms, cryptocurrency terms, token terms. And so you have to get creative, and you have to definitely bring in, like I was talking about earlier, value and incentive for what they're actually looking for. So, a lot of the times for investors or studios, they want to either get find diverse talent, as I was mentioning, or they want to get projects that are going to have good ROI. And so you just have to think of these incentives when you're creating some of these, marketing campaigns or marketing roadmap, as well as the product roadmap and what features we're going to roll out that are going to match what brings, value to these various, audiences.
I love that.
But for example, we created a studio interface, and you don't have to know anything about blockchain to be a studio and to load your projects up and to be able to, do the same things that the general platform does. If you think about Filmio, like you said, it's kind of this hub. And if you think about a studio, they can leverage it in sort of a partitioned environment and, choose whether their projects are, shared among the broader platform or not. But it's things like that where they can see the real world value. Or film festivals. We have a project right now for film festivals where the film festival, this is basically a giant film festival. So why not allow film festivals to use the platform to do many of the things that they have to do kind of offline or with, poor quality tools. So those are kind of our entry points into the industry where we're delivering value that kind of meets them where they live and solves a problem that they have.
One of the things that we keep running into in Web3 is mainstream is just around the corner. And,
Right.
2010 was the first time I bought Bitcoin, and I said, wow, this is neat. And I threw it away because it wasn't, there was nothing to do with it then. Came back in 2014, 2015 when I thought Ethereum was kind of a really cool concept. And same thing, just kind of like little touch points, but never really went full time into the industry. Bryan, you've been around doing this for a while, and you're a seasoned blockchain, and tech entrepreneur overall. And I'm only picking on you because in 2019, you're like, mainstream's right here. Where do you think we are in that evolutionary cycle to get to people where Warren's not having to defend, what blockchain is or isn't, and that people just accept that this is the correct way to do things?
I think so. The things that don't help are like the thing we just saw with Kim Kardashian, things where, well-known people in the industry are unknowingly getting involved in things and, maybe breaking the law. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but, where, the industry there's so much risk perceived in the industry. It's partially from the volatility of, the larger coins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the things that they're going through. It's the news cycle where the SEC is coming out stating things that are scaring people on a regular basis. I think that regulation is actually going to help more than it's going to hurt once it finally gets figured out, because there will be some stability. And I think that this will fully be embraced when there are useful applications on blockchain that do things that people need, solve problems, because so much of the industry right now is so focused on infrastructure. So, I think the combination of stability, regulation, allowing people to kind of, experience blockchain without the whipsaw effect of, hey, I really started to understand it and got on OpenSea and bought an NFT, and then it became worth nothing. And, then I heard that it might be a security and I might have broken the law, I mean, so when that stuff stops happening, I think it'll mature a lot. And then again, back to the usability thing, because that's just huge. People need to not have to think that they are doing something technical, because the deer in the headlights of having somebody that doesn't understand technology have to start digesting terms that they've never heard of before just kind of stops things in their tracks.
Yeah, and I will say, everyone keeps thinking mainstream is a few minutes away, but mainstream will be when blockchain is invisible. You remember the days of you had to dial into direct servers. You had to, you went around trying to get people to get rid of their AOL CD-ROMs were being mailed around. And I still feel like we're a lot like that. I got my ledgers around here that, you're still kind of having to, which just feels very much like, kind of a 14K modem. It's like, well, you could do this, but here's a slightly different way. Lauren, when you think about the technology and you were new to this space, was it, you're clearly comfortable with it today, but was it overwhelming at first to kind of think about all these new, technology terms?
Yeah, so it was definitely a learning curve for sure. But even from, my very early days at NBC Universal, this was my first job out of college. I actually helped develop a system that streamlined assistant editors being able to get technical production specifications, eliminating email to get it right through this system. And so I always had this love for efficiency, and whatever it took to learn the technology to get there, to find efficiency or streamline, an industry or make an industry operate better. So it definitely was a learning curve. It was a lot of research, a lot of education for myself. And Bryan and the rest of the team, they are so highly educated and enthralled in the industry every single day, and they keep up with the trends and know exactly what's going on. So it was a learning curve, but it was definitely a lot easier having such a knowledgeable, experienced team to be able to take me under their wing and teach me about, the nuances of the industry and stuff like that.
What's the largest project you guys have worked on so far to date on the platform?
Good question. There are a number that are not really currently disclosable, but of the ones that are, I mean, if we're talking about film, budget, probably there's one called La Voz del Sol Speak Sunlight that I think is like a $5 million budget. It's basically the two probably best known actors in Spain are involved in this one. And it has a wonderful director, creator behind it. That one. And then the other one that is really far through the system is this project 52577, which, do you know what that date is? 52577. That was the
No.
date that Star Wars first hit theaters. And it's one of our co-founders project. His name's Pat Johnson. That was, I think it turned out to be close to 4 million, that budget. And we got involved when the film was produced, but it really needed finishing funds. And, he had been working on this film. It's a beautiful film. It's actually in some theaters right now. It just got sold to Showtime.
Awesome.
And, so that's probably the other one that we can talk about as of yet. And for the rest of them, they're really early. I mean, the platform actually isn't even publicly launched. But there are 65 feature-length films and TV shows in the platform right now at various stages, and 2,000 creators that are on our wait list that are waiting to gain access to
Wow.
be able to submit their project. So it's, there are going to be some amazing ones and some that are not really disclosable that have much bigger people attached to them that everyone would know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I think one of the things I really like about what you guys are working on and how you're doing it is it feels very evolutionary. You're definitely disruptive. You're clearly disrupting the industry, but you're being very cordial and complementary to the systems and processes and procedures that are already in place. A lot of times when I hear this, like, "Hey, we don't need studios. We can, we're just going to do everything on our own." You guys are a plug-in to an ecosystem that kind of needs a little refresh, especially for the younger generations, because they do want to have feedback and they do want to have ownership. I mean, to think about the concept of Gen Z would rather have an NFT than a Rolex watch, and they want people to know what their accomplishments were in life right from the first very time they meet them. So, Lauren, what are the type of things that you could that Filmio, can help to enhance a voter's or a DAO member's identity to kind of showcase their passion for this?
Yeah, so actually, the more that you stake fan governance tokens, the more governance power you actually get on the platform. So that's why it's so exciting and so important to be an early adopter of our platform, because the earlier that you come in and you start interacting with our platform, the more decision-making power that you're going to be getting on the platform. So if you start making, or supporting projects that continue to do well and have good ROI and get the green light, you will have more decision-making power to keep green lighting projects. So it's really exciting for fans to be able to, become actual decision makers, and I think that's part of what their identity is, what they want their identity to be through staking and interacting and engaging on our platform.
Yeah, the staking and reputation system built into the platform is really pretty cool for that exact reason, because it showcases the people who become more involved and who gain more influence. When you stake tokens, you get a staking reward paid back in fan tokens, which gives you more governance power. We also track your reputation based on the things that you do. Every interaction gains you reputation power and earns you badges. So it's a gamified ecosystem. You get badges and NFTs that really showcase your passion for the industry and your involvement in the platform. And as you rise through those ranks, it also helps you rise through the ranks of the DAO, from just a fan to bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels in the DAO. And so it's very visible. You can actually see. It was a good question, because it is important to understand who these people are within the ecosystem, and that they didn't just get there by buying their way in. For example, you can obviously buy some level of influence, as you get in, but we have quadratic voting algorithms and things of that nature that effectively prevent whales from skewing the vote and things like that. And that's because of the reputation system, which is very visible to everybody within the platform.
Really, again, guys, amazing conversation. Tons of really good insights into the way the film industry works today and how Filmio kind of integrates in and enhances what's already there without, while being disruptive, but also being respectful. And I think that's a really big key to any entrepreneur operating in the space. It's great that you want to upend an industry and you've got an idea that's going to take it over. But knowing how it works and knowing how to integrate your project into there and facilitating that roadmap to move towards viability is a huge thing. Team is easily one of the biggest parts of that. So without knowledge, without those 10,000 hours in that field, you're kind of just guessing, and you may be really well educated on reading things, but doing it is a whole different deal. Bryan, what's the team like that you've assembled here?
Yeah, the team is amazing. I mean, I'm really fortunate to work with people like Lauren every day that just are so plugged into what they do. And it's not just connections, but like you said, it's that 10,000 hours, that experience. But you guys heard some of Lauren's background, but it goes well beyond that. Topic for another day. But I'll just highlight a few people because it's we have, I think, 16 people on the team. It's pretty small, but very potent. One of the people that is very influential in the company is Orlando Pedregosa. Orlando, actually, we acquired a small project that he was starting when we met him a couple years ago, where he had an idea to do something similar. Wasn't blockchain based, but he had, the alignment was there when we met him. And Orlando's family started one of the most successful European production companies, film production companies, called Bob Bieka. And they do a large amount of the film production for Netflix, for HBO, for Disney, for Sony, for Universal, you name it. I mean, so they're very well established. And again, it kind of comes down a lot of times to connections and just having the people that are their DNA, like Lauren's, right? Their DNA is just all about the film world. And this is the bridge. This is how we reach out and we get people on board that we could really use this, that would otherwise be stifled by that blockchain word. There's our CTO, Chris. Chris is really a prolific full stack developer. Chris was one of the very early contributors to WordPress, wrote a lot of the plugins that made it useful to people across the board, wrote the books actually that were published that taught people how to use it, was involved heavily in Apache, was employed by the Skype founders doing some interesting projects, is an author, but is also a creator, a musician, like just one of these savants that just does everything, could write the entire platform if he had enough time on his own and do every aspect of it. So, people like that. There's, my brother Corey. My brother is one of the biggest blockchain nerds you'll ever imagine, and is an efficiency freak. So you need the people to glue the team together. He's our chief product officer and has his fingers in everything. So, I mean, I could go on and on. We've got other, a couple of celebrities on board, guys like Kevin Harrington, Black Elvis from the music industry, who's, bringing a lot of connections in, but very, he produced Beyonce and Jamie Foxx and, a whole bunch of other people. So, it's like I said before, we're kind of split down the middle. Half of us are just nerds like me, propellers spinning all the time. The other half are from the film world. And we're very fortunate to have the people that we have as a very tight-knit team that cover all the bases.
That's fabulous. That's awesome. Yeah, and team is absolutely what I always choose to invest in. You can products are great, theses are great, white papers are fabulous, but a team's going to win. And having a team that like yours that sounds like their experience is a big game changer, especially when you're trying to break into an asset class that is really really tight knit for the most part. Lauren, you guys have a very advantageous roadmap ahead of you guys. What's kind of the next phase for Filmio, your tokens or anything related to that?
Yeah, so we actually have some really exciting news, and we're launching a really large campaign. We're launching the largest airdrop in the entertainment industry. We're actually airdropping 40 million fan governance tokens to 2,000 creators and 20,000 fans that want to help govern and reinvent this new Hollywood that we're trying to build on the blockchain. And what's really exciting is any fan or creator that wants to join and become an early adopter on our platform also enters for a chance to win Bitcoin. So fans have a chance to win $1,000 in Bitcoin, and creators, even more excitingly, have a chance to enter for to win $10,000 in development funds for their film or TV project. So we're really excited.
That's
about
amazing.
that.
You know, and it really, you know, the core concept of airdropping is, you know, very, you know, basic to Web3. We think of it all the time, no problem. But the idea for marketers is, you know, such a drastic difference that if Porsche could say, hey, we want to send a letter to everyone that has a Porsche in their garage, for the cost is almost nothing, but we just want to say, hey, thank you for this, or give them an offer for, you know, an oil change, whatever the case is, it would dynamically change the entire marketing industry, you know, with so much less waste and everything else. So the concept that you guys have here of, you know, how do you reward the creators? How do you reward the most rabid fans and keep them engaged without the waste? I mean, you can do this with a shotgun approach, but you're hearing a lot of people are like, I don't even know what this is. Never mind. Is really dynamic. And so I applaud both of you guys for a very holistic and you know, self-prophesizing view on the industry, that, you know, all you guys have to do is continue moving forward, and the industry will adapt itself to you without you having to force yourself into this industry. So that's very cool, guys.
Totally. There's one other thing I'll add just real briefly, because I know we don't have a ton of time, but you know, really what we're launching now is phase 1, right? This is about governance. It's about validation. It's about audience building. Phase 2, once the audience is big enough, and we already have most of this built, is where the funding tools open. And when the Go score rises to a certain level based on fan involvement, it unlocks a series of tools. There's an NFT studio if you want to raise non-dilutive capital with an NFT collection. Traditional crowdfunding tools where we're partnering with broker dealers that can sponsor campaigns. And then a matchmaking system that actually will match you with the right film fund, or if it's appropriate for Netflix, if it's within their criteria or whatever the case may be, that can actually match you with the right partner for both funding and distribution. So that's sort of the second leg of the stool. And there's a third leg that comes later, and we'll keep that as a surprise, but we're getting so close to the second leg right now, I can tease it. And it's pretty exciting stuff. So it's a really continuum. It's a branching narrative for these creators, and very exciting stuff. And these tokens coming out, people should really, you know, grab these things and really participate and you know, help govern and liberate this industry, because you know, it's so needed. It's such a good thing to do for the world, and I think you'll have a lot of fun doing it as well.
I absolutely love that. If people want to know more, they want to get involved, they want to get prepped and ready for the airdrop, what's the best place to find you guys and learn more?
Really, film.io, you know, that's us. Or go ahead, Lauren. You probably have a better answer than me.
Well, no, I was going to say, film.io, our site, but you also can join our Discord, Filmio Official, and we will actually be we launch and drop exclusive information in there, including the date that we're going to be launching the airdrop. So definitely join our Discord.
Yeah, you want to be on the Discord for sure. And if you have trouble finding it, you can find it on film.io.
There you go. Fabulous, guys. Y Whales, this is Lauren and Bryan with Filmio, film.io. Tons of good alpha in here, tons of really good insights. And, you know, again, a mature team with a product that's actually relatively mature for blockchain space. Really excited to see where you guys are heading from here. And, you know, really, really, more than anything else, the idea about fan engagements, I truly hope, you know, you guys find a ton of success, and let me know when I can start the petition to redo season 8 of Game of Thrones, please.
Let's start that tomorrow. Very cool. Thank you so much, Jay. It's been great being on your show.
Y Whales, we'll see you guys next time. Lauren, Bryan, thank you.